Hey everybody, Jesse here for 3Prong Gaming, and in today's tips and tricks video, I'm going to demystify the dreaded access none error messages. In Unreal Engine, there's typically two flavors of access nones that we're going to come across on a regular basis. The first is the access none reference error, and the second is the access none pending kill. I will explain both these errors and why we get them, as well as how to avoid them in your own projects. For this video, I'm using the standard third-person template project, and I've done nothing special except for create a single actor blueprint using one of the custom meshes. In C++, every time you create a new variable, you are required to declare a variable type. What this declaration does is it tells the compiler how much memory it needs to reserve for that specific variable. One of the added benefits of declaring a variable as an object type is it also gives you access to that object's variables and functions. For our first example, I'm going to create a variable and make it of our custom third-person game mode, and I'm going to get a reference to that. And let's just go ahead and name this GM for game mode. So we've created our variable, we told it the type it wants to be, the object we want it to be, which is the game mode. We come in here and we drop it and we get it in here. Now in the third person game mode, I've created a custom event, which is just a function called print something. And when that's called, it's going to print a string called and say this was called from the game mode, so we know exactly where it was coming from. When we drag this out and we pull off of here, we now have access to that custom function called print something. So we put it in here, and typically you think, okay, great, I've got this hooked up. I've declared the variable type. It knows it wants to be the third person game mode, and we want to call the function print something. So we compile it and save it, and we hit play. Now we hit the P key, and we get absolutely no messages on the screen like we expected. So we back out, and we've got an error. We open up the error message, and here we see our dreaded access none. Now if you read this error, it might be a little bit confusing at first, but let me try to explain this a little bit. I find it easier to actually read it backwards. Here we got third person character, which is the object. So we open up the third person character blueprint. It's in the event graph. We're in the event graph, and it's from the node print something. So here's our node print something. It's coming from the function execute ubergraph, which typically this is the name of your function, but because we dropped in a P key binding right here, that is the specific name to the engine for that function. And it is in the property GM. So the last thing on the list is the main problem of the error, which is the GM variable. Think of an object variable as a container. You're telling it this is the specific type of item that you're going to hold. However, the variable is still empty. Just because you have access to the custom events and functions and variables inside of that object doesn't mean that the container is actually full. So what you need to do is you need to fill that object. When it comes to game modes, custom controllers and player states, game states, things of that nature, what I find it best to do is whatever blueprint that you want to use this variable on, in this case a third person character, is in the event begin play, you get your reference to it, so that way you only have to make a call to it once. So for this example, in our game mode, we want to get game mode, and what this built-in function does is it gets the game's game mode. In Unreal Engine, you can only have one game mode running at a time, so it knows specifically it's going to get the game mode that is being ran during runtime. We drag off of this. Now we still don't have access to our print something function because, well, this is the basic game mode. Our custom game mode is a child of this game mode. So what we need to do is we need to drag off of here, and we need to cast to our third person game mode. Casting just says, hey, we have an object that is of this type, but it has specific functionality, right? In this case, it's our third person game mode. Now, if we were to drag off of this and type print something, again, we have access now to our custom event there. However, you could put this down here in your key binding, but that means every time you press P, it's going to cast to that specific object, which is not something we want. Casting is very expensive. So what we do is we come over here, we grab our variable, and we set the output of that cast into our variable. So now we are actually filling our container with the object that we want. So we compile it, we save it, now we press play, and we hit P, and you'll see up there, we now get, this was called from the game mode. So now that our object is filled, it knows exactly which object we want to use. When it comes to custom blueprints and actors, the same rules still apply. For this next example, I'm going to spawn my custom blueprint that I created off camera using the F key into a specific location. Don't mind this code. This is nothing specific for the tutorial. It only tells it where to spawn the cube. I've created a variable called cube reference, and it is referencing my custom actor. So let's drop that in here and let's get it. In the blueprint I created, I've got a custom event called print something else. And when it's called, it's going to print a string that says this was successfully called from the cube BP. So back in here, we take our cube reference variable, we pull it out here, we call print something else, plug it into the G key binding, compile it and save it. Now we think, okay, well, we're spawning it into the world, so it must know what we're talking about. Press play, press F, and it spawns our cube into the world. Now we press G, and again, nothing happens. Escape, and we get our error message again. Access none, try to read property cube reference. If you go and you read this backwards again, you'll see third person character. We're in our third person character, event graph, print something else, which is that node there, the function that is being called, and the root of the problem, which is the cube reference. So we close that out. That means this reference is still empty. It doesn't know that this is what we want to reference. If you have multiple of the same object in the world, it's not going to know exactly which one you want to do. So when we spawn this in the world, we need to be able to store this into our variable. Now, again, if you're going to have multiple of the same actors in the world, you'll want to store them into an array. But for this example, we're just going to use our single variable object here, plug this in. So now our container is full. It knows exactly what we want to do. The one we spawn into the world will go into the cube reference there. So compile it and save it. Press play again. Hit F, it spawns it, press G, and now we get this was successfully called from the cube BP. Now, just to show you, if we press F again, and now we got multiple objects in here, even though we're just storing one, if we press G, we still only get one message even though we have two variables in the world. That is because only the last one that was spawned into the world is in that variable. So this is actually being called from that cube and not that one, because now it doesn't know about this particular cube because we didn't store it into an array. Hit escape, and voila, no access, none errors. For this final example, I'm going to explain the pending kill access none error. So in order to get that, let's drop in our cube reference again. Pull it out here, and let's go ahead and destroy the actor. So every time we press the V key now, it's going to destroy the actor. Compile it and save it, press play. We press F to spawn our item, G to get our little message up there. Now we press V to destroy the actor, and let's press G once. Oh, we don't get our message, and I'm going to push V again to try to destroy it again. Nothing happens again. Hit escape, we get an error message here, and now we get two errors. The first one is because I pushed the G key. The second one is because I pushed the V key. Now, when you read this error, it's going to read mostly the same, except for here it says attempt to access, and it's going to give you the object it tried to access, which is the object we had stored in this property or variable cube reference. And it tells you here, but the object is pending kill, and then the rest of it will read the same from function uber graph. Now, the reason why I press that both times, both the G and the V, and I try to do it twice to give you two errors here, is if it was two separate functions, it would tell you specifically which functions they were. So if I was destroying it in a custom event that was called, destroy this actor, it would say destroy this actor _ third person character. Okay, so They're two different events using two different key bindings. So just because they are key bindings, it's going to give the same execute Uber graph right there. And then the rest of it just reads the same. So if you read it backwards and go to the third person character in the event graph and the destroy actor in the print something there, it's going to tell you where the problem is, what the function is. Okay, so we close that out. Now the reason why that is think of a variable instance as being alive or dead. When we create the container initially, when we create the variable and declare its type, it's an empty container. It has nothing in it. But when we spawn the actor and we store it into the variable, it now has a live object. You're spawning something, so think of it as spawning as giving it birth. So you've got your live object in here and it can access that live object. However, when we destroy it, well, you're killing that object. The world, even though the variable still has that object stored in there, it's, for all intents and purposes, it is dead. You can no longer access a dead variable. It's waiting garbage collection. So you have an object in there, but it is really of no use to you. So to avoid those pending kills, what you need to do is, it's very simple, is we come out here, we grab our cube reference, and we check to see is valid. Now when you type is valid, you're going to get two options right here. You're going to get a function is valid and the one with the question mark right here. I'll touch on both of them really quick. You click on this one and it's going to give you just a function here and a Boolean output, which is going to be either true or false. Is it valid? In other words, is it still alive? And from a Boolean, as you know, you just run a branch and hook it into the branch like so. And then plug in the executions here. And if it is valid, true, then you want to destroy actor. If not, you don't do anything else. Okay? Or you can run, depending on whatever your function is, you can run something else if it's not alive. But for this example, I'm not going to run anything off the false. And the other is valid. Let's pull off of here and type is valid. The one with the question mark, we hit that. It's just a macro. It's ultimately the same thing, except for they've already put in inside the macro the branches for you. So you're testing your object. Is it valid or is it not valid? So only if it's valid do we want to destroy the actor. So we compile it and save it. Same thing here with the G key, is we check if this object is valid. So let's go is valid. And I'm just going to use the macro again because it's easier. It's one node instead of two. Is valid. So now only if this is valid do we want to call print something else. So compile it, save it, press play. We spawn our object into the world. Press G. We get our function that works. We press V to destroy it. Now we press G. Nothing happens. Press V to try to destroy it again. Hit escape. And now we get no errors because they weren't valid objects. So nothing occurred with that. Now the is valid check can also be used for pretty much anything else. And you probably should, if it's important tasks, it should be checked no matter what. Just like if we came back up here to our game mode example, if we pull out here and test is valid. Oops. Let's try that again. Pull out here, is valid, and use the macro. Pull it up here. Let's go like this. Is valid, hook that up. Now I'm just going to disconnect this to show, because remember, now with this disconnected, we're not actually storing that into the variable. Compile it and save it. So now when we press the P key to call the blueprint from the game mode, or call the function from the game mode, nothing happens. I keep pressing P and nothing happens, but we get no errors because it's checking is it valid. So that's it. That's how you handle your access nones. That is why you get your access nones, and how you can avoid them in your future projects. I hope this was of some help. If it was, please do me a favor. Go down and hit that like button. It helps me out a ton. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit subscribe while you're down there liking it. And until next time, peace.